Welcome back, everyone. I have a very special guest today. I'm joined by Brian Johnson, serial entrepreneur and co-founder of DeepM. Brian has a really interesting background doing incredible work in the Amazon space, and I'm excited to dive into it. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Torben, glad to be here. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Share with us your background and then take us to your current role at DeepM.
So the last 18 years, I've been in the e-commerce space, and the last 11 of those primarily in the Amazon marketplace space. Heavy into being a solution provider and a coach. I did a little bit of selling here and there. Actually, I do have some partnerships where I do sell products as well. It kind of keeps me sharp in some of those areas. But a lot of what I've worked on over the years is helping brands and agencies to grow sales. Historically, that was through advertising, sponsored ads. Had the first PPC software in the space, I was always trying to solve my own challenges. And so I didn't have a problem as far as developing. This was before all the vibe coding tools where you could just whip something up in a week. First ad software in the Amazon marketplace, first advertising training course, moved on to co-found an ad agency, exited all three of those about 3 years ago in order to pursue specifically search rank optimization and really going into the weeds when it comes to reverse engineering how the Amazon algorithm works and how we get products to high visibility, high search rank, and increase sales.
Excellent. When I was going through DeepM, there's a clear emphasis on making marketing more intelligent and adaptive, not just automated. How do you define the difference between automation and true intelligence in marketing systems?
The amount of data that you're looking at. I consider that DeepM is first and foremost, it's a competitive intelligence platform. So we're collecting a lot of data to the point where when we throw this batch of data into our deep learning algorithm, we're looking at probably 20 to 30 million data points for a single product niche, right? That's if you benchmark that against what it would take for humans to do that, that would require a brand or an agency to spend 20 to 30,000 man hours per week to do what we're doing through our data collection. So we're collecting more data. The only one I think that probably collects more data than us is Amazon itself. But yeah, we process through that so that we have more situational awareness. So I look at it from a standpoint of if we can know more about what's going on and have more signals and know how to influence the way the algorithm works, then we have a definite competitive advantage.
Absolutely. It's very interesting. And what are some typical clients you work with and services on top of that?
We've got a very wide range. So we've got some that have, they might have, a single product grouping of consumer products, maybe 5 products, and they've been selling those for a year. We have others that have multiple brands. They sell, omni-channel. They're across, retail and all the other marketplaces. And so it's a vast range, everything from, I don't know, a couple 100,000 a year on Amazon to 100 million on Amazon. So it's a very wide range as far as who we've been able to help. Usually we try to narrow it down into what's the low hanging fruit, what's the biggest bang for the buck that we can provide as far as a segment of their catalog. Even if they've got several thousand SKUs, we'll typically focus in on maybe, the first, 20 or 50 or something like that.
Yeah. And you're working closely with marketing teams and agencies. I speak a lot with marketing agencies here on this podcast. And what do you think most agency owners are still underestimating when it comes to AI and data infrastructure?
I mean, I was in the agency space prior to this, and so I certainly understand the pains of what it means to work with people, especially clients. The challenge that we usually have is, as an agency, one of the things that we had provided was, a specific set of services in the Amazon space. We were doing advertising, we were doing content, maybe we were adding on some additional, product listing creation or troubleshooting with Amazon when there's problems, that kind of stuff. Inventory forecasting. In other words, it's usually a limited set of data. Well, the challenge on that is when you get more competition and you get more competition that is able to automate using maybe they vibe coded their own tools internally and they're just kind of accelerating. You get to the point where the idea of the boutique, we're very hands-on, boutique, human-based, agency, which is how we founded our agency. It became one of the biggest agencies in the space, but it started out very much a boutique. All of a sudden, now that's a liability because now you've got, human overhead and the average price point for things like creating, new creative for a product listing, images, videos, copywriting, advertising, all these things are continuing to depress in price point over time. And so there's this constant pressure of not only am I producing the value that is expected by a client, but also what have I done lately? That's the big pain point is what have you done for me lately? Because the reality is that every company, every single month is going through and they're looking at their accounting, and the accountant is going to be the first thing they're going to do is going to say, hey, here's your biggest expenses. And if you have some agency expense that comes up at the top of that list every single month, year over year, every single month you have to justify that existence. And if you haven't provided something new, then all of a sudden you're expendable, right? Or increasingly expendable. And so the advantage that we walk into with DeepM is that we're providing something to the agencies. The agencies love us because we're walking in with something that nobody's seen before, that they haven't been able to offer before, and it breathes fresh life into a lot of their client relationships that were declining year over year because they weren't providing something new and the price is getting depressed. So it's a
Yeah.
constant chasing of, how do I provide value?
Yeah, no, excellent insights. And moving into the industry trends, obviously we touched a lot on this already with what you're saying, but what major shifts are you seeing in the industry right now?
I mean, there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of noise that happens anytime something changes. Um, the whole idea of agentic commerce and someday we won't even shop. We'll have, AI agents that'll just buy things, without even us having to ask. I don't know if that's true because, a majority of purchases are first time purchases. They're not recurring. Like recurring is like, yeah, that's easy. It's like, cool. It's called subscribe and save, like just keep sending it to me every 3 months. But the reality is that most purchases are new. And so there's a certain amount of evaluation of what is available. But, even in those cases, the agents that are working on behalf of a consumer are going to have a certain set of rules. Like I'm going to lean more towards what's the better price. Don't go for the premium option. I'm just trying this out for the first time. Obviously do a better job of filtering out what products or services fit my needs and have a good reputation and, are a good price. And, there's a lot of filtering out the weeds from the grass, if you will. And that's certainly going to help with shopping. I wouldn't say that's going to replace the human as far as like having an agent shop for myself as an example, But what that does is it creates noise. What that does is it creates discussion. It requires, a flurry of posts on LinkedIn and social media that's like, oh, I've got a pet peeve word, and that's game changer, because it's way overused. And everything that comes out every single day is a game changer, and it's like no, it's not. It's like cool, it's cool and neat and everything, but it's not going to fundamentally change everything. But what we are definitely seeing, of course, is the ability for a lot more people, not everybody, but a lot more people to be able to develop their own in-house apps that allow them to take care of their own tasks, um, and how that affects things like whether it's e-commerce and shopping, or their day-to-day functions, or their ability to care for their loved ones. All of these things are making it so they can accelerate that. My fear actually is That's not going to create, the luxury lifestyle and the relief to the consumer because they went through and they automated. In my opinion, it's actually going to create more noise because they're going to try to be everywhere all the time. They're going to they're going to say yes too often because they think it's like, well, I can automate this. I can vibe code it. I can have an agent do X and Y. It sounds good. It sounds promising, but there's a lot of risk to our mental state that I think is we haven't really considered yet, that we won't see for another few years before it really gets embedded and starts affecting things like our kids, and the next generation. So
Yeah, great insights. In this space, I mean, it's getting crowded, as you mentioned, with AI tools, and there's a new hype every day. It feels like. What
yeah.
do you believe will separate the companies that win over the next 2 to 3 years?
The thing about being able to create it's commonly said, it's like, oh yeah, no, I built this app in 4 hours, right? Yeah, but then you spent the next 2 weeks actually debugging it and refining it and that kind of thing. For people like me that are really good about ideation and have always been held back because the software development team, for instance, moves too slowly because they have requirements and they have systems and they do sprints and all this kind of stuff. I want to be able to iterate through ideas. It's almost similar to, like, say, a painter. It just says like, well, I'm just gonna, I don't like that one. Let me throw it away and just start over and just kind of work. You can actually do that now, of course, with software apps. A lot of problems can be built into those, security holes and exposing data, and, in other words, it's not really production, like public ready, but internally probably works fine. But the advantage, the thing that we're able to do is we're able to rapid prototype and create tools internally very fast using AI tools. Um, but we can also throw them away just as quickly. In other words, our ability to pivot is way easier than it ever was before. It's not like, hey, we've been working on this for 2 years. Maybe we need to pivot to something else. No, it's like, you know what? I tried that for 2 weeks and now I'm going to try something different. um, it's very much the chasing the squirrel, kind of, I think there's an advantage to it in that I don't have to stay committed to one particular idea that I was running with, but it's super easy to abandon the ideas that may have had merit had I worked them harder, longer, and really pursued them. And so part of this is, are you familiar with the Field of Dreams problem? The
No.
Field of Dreams was a Kevin Costner movie, about baseball where, essentially the storyline is that he's being told, voices are essentially telling him that it's like, if you build this on his farm, if you build this lit baseball diamond, that all the famous baseball players will come and play on your farm. And if if you build it, they will come. Well, the problem with that is that's the same mentality that most people who create things like software or business startups have. Is they are more inventors and they just assume that people will gravitate to them, when in fact the reality is that you have to go out and really understand the pain that you're trying to solve and pre-sell that. And this is something I know for a fact that I do incorrectly, is to pre-sell and to get engagement constantly, and that requires a lot of interaction with the potential customers and the existing customers to make sure that you're actually solving their pain continuously. You're not just inventing like, hey, this wouldn't this be cool, um and so I think that's where we're going to get a lot of attrition when it comes to invented software apps. And I think that's where a lot of my recommendation on that is, if you're going to vibe code for yourself first and foremost. Automate 90% of what you don't want to do. Get that automated so that it gets it off your plate, so it frees you up for your own creativity. I think that's could be a potentially huge advantage. Don't worry about trying to solve every problem in your company. Solve yourself first. Solve your own desk.
Incredible. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that field of dreams and yeah, thinking I created something and then it was all in my head kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't know how to market it, or, you just hope they come and
Yeah. It was
nope.
like, yeah, no one showed up. Excellent. So let's dive in a bit. Like, what's working well for you right now, and what are some challenges you are facing in your business?
99 challenges all the time. It's part of I've gotten sucked into the idea through looking at hundreds of LinkedIn posts that it's like, oh, all you need is a new Claude skill that I just need to import, and that's just gonna magically solve this whole department. And the reality is the same reason that we get, big companies that lay off a bunch of people and then they start bringing people back, because the reality is they thought that, some AI software solution was going to fully automate what somebody did previously, and then they find out, no, that's not the case. Now, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't pull the trigger and reduce the staff. That's just if it's a public company, they have to do that kind of stuff for the stockholders. That's just part of that business. But I think the reality is that certainly solving my own tasks where I recognize, like, you know what, I can do this analysis on behalf of a marketing partner or an internal team, and I end up doing this same analysis again and again, and I could easily rabbit hole and spend 8 hours to make sure that I get it right. And the reality is that that should be an automated task, or at least part of it should be. It doesn't don't ever I don't wanna ever fool myself and say, like, "Oh, well, that can't be automated," because everything can be automated to some extent. Even if you take what's the repeatable 50% of what I do that I think is unique, that is custom, I would guess that at least 50% of what anything that I'm doing can be automated. Um, and so I have to make sure that I don't convince myself that I have to do it, right?
Mhm.
Because that's part of the problem is, like, if I'm not asking myself on a regular basis, if I plan out my week, for instance, and that's something I have to discipline myself to make sure I do every week, because when I don't, my week is like, well, what did I accomplish this week? I didn't accomplish anything, right? And so if I don't try to structure what my week looks like, and then have a very serious filter with a razor on it that says, like, okay, if I only accomplish one thing per day and everything else fell to the wayside, what would be the result? What would be the impact to me or to my family or to my business if I didn't do these other things? Would it die, or would it survive another week? Right. And that's ultimately is it. I have to constantly fight to make sure that I'm getting the things done that I have to get done to move my business forward, to move my family forward, to move myself forward, at the expense of maybe doing some things that I creatively enjoy doing, where I like to speculate and invent new things. I want to do that 24/7, frankly. But the reality is that as a business owner, I have to, and a key member of my family, is that there's certain things that I must get done that have no creative benefit to me, that just has to get done. And those things should not be an excuse for me, like, not to accomplish these other things. It's an opportunity to say, how do I automate the things that I must do so that I get to do the things that I want to do, that I'm compelled by, that drive me, that energize me? And to separate what drains me from what energizes me, and making sure that I'm trying to automate as many things that drain my energy so that I'm feeling, a compulsion when I wake up in the morning. It's like, yeah, I get to do this today. And 99% of the world is not in that position, but they can certainly get there if they simply just say, look, there's part of my day that I don't want to do but must get done. And that's where the technology is caught up to the point where, you know what, a lot of that can actually be done on your behalf, or at least partially can be done, and it can take some of that off your plate.
Mm, excellent. And if you could solve one major challenge today, then what would it be?
One major challenge, you're talking about from like a world hunger kind of
No,
standpoint,
no,
or
from your business
because I've
perspective.
got some big dreams for deep
Yeah,
down.
yeah. So let's not go there on this one. This for the next
For me personally, a lot of times it's
in your business related, Brian. Yeah, like
yeah, I mean, within the business, I'm always like, what's the most important critical thing that I need to accomplish, right? A lot of times, so that's kind of an effort that I've put in lately. Is more of, we just hired a new a head of our sales, which we didn't have previously. That was on me. That was a role that I took on, and I always convinced myself, yeah, I can do that, but I was never good at it. Never got around to it. Um, I can have those one-on-one conversations and those pitches and that kind of stuff, but the follow through and the follow up and the prospecting, all that kind of stuff, I suck at. And so, bringing in somebody, just admitting this is not a strength for me. This is not my superpower. Therefore, I need to get it away from me. That's the biggest thing every single month that I have to revisit, and I have to push myself to do better about separating what's my superpower versus what needs to get done, and asking for help. And it doesn't mean I even need to vibe code. I mean, I would love to be able to bring in, somebody who simply was just a vibe code staff member who all they did was just go around the company and just say like, okay, what can I vibe code this week? Right. In addition to our software development team. Right. And so, but the problem is if somebody is willing to do that as a job, they're probably doing it for themselves already. you know So yeah, but for me, absolutely the biggest challenge I have, and that's it's a recurring challenge, and that is just staying clear on what must be done versus what is my superpower, what should I be doing. And sometimes that can be very sobering if you really think about it, because we tend to say yes to everything. We tend to take on more than we really should be. And the reality is understanding what my strengths and my weaknesses are and where I need to place myself, where I'm actually going to get the job done and do it well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredibly true. And when you just dive a bit even deeper on that, like when you think about growth internally at Deepen, what signals are you paying closest attention to right now? And I'm not just talking vanity metrics, but things that actually tell you the system is working.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the outside, obviously we want to grow sales for the company, right? We're a software company and we let users, right? From our client standpoint, from our customer standpoint, it is how are we actually growing their sales? Like our technology helps brands to increase to essentially beat their competition by beating everybody in search rank and getting higher visibility. But the reality is that you still have to point it that ranking gain at what actually is going to convert for that product. And there's a lot of noise in the marketplace about like, oh yeah, go after the popular search terms and you'll just magically just get sales. And the reality is you don't. You could be ranked highly for a very popular search term and the conversion rate sucks so bad that you don't actually get sales. So at the end of the day, it's what is the actual sales dollars, in our case, organic sales on the Amazon marketplace, and then in the future, other channels as well. What's the actual organic sales? The ranking is simply just a vehicle to get there. But ultimately, it's the final output is um, technically it's not even just organic sales. It's what's the net profitability, right? And so that's where we need to work with our customers and say, okay, we understand your cost of doing business at the product level. And therefore, as a result of the ranking, you got these sales, and the profitability on those sales is X. And that is the number that matters. And did that number pay for our services and make it all a win, right? You have to do the math.
Hmm.
You
Uh,
can't just hope.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And then, yeah, and the data is there now to actually be transparent on that. It's, yeah, fascinating. Uh, Wrapping up here is incredible. Is a lot of good information here, Brian. Let's look into the crystal ball. Like, where do you want to be 12 months from now?
so a lot of the expansion that we have has to do with we're expanding out into other Amazon marketplaces as well as other e-commerce marketplaces. The Walmart and Shopify and TikTok Shop and some of these others where our technology also works from a competitive intelligence standpoint. So the next year is going to be more about that kind of marketplace expansion, getting out to more places. That's going to give us some additional insights that help us to understand where consumer traffic is flowing. Being isolated into one specific marketplace makes the assumption that your customer is always there. And the reality is they're getting constantly pulled in different directions by other platforms, by their tools, by videos, whatever the case is. And so we have to understand, where is the consumer? Are they still all searching on Amazon, or have they split their attention between Amazon and TikTok Shop and somewhere else, right? And so sometimes we see in certain product categories where it's bleeding off of one platform and going to another. So part of where I'm going to get to in, after next year, year two is going to be more of, how do we pay attention to where the consumer is shopping? And then beyond that, the vision is, now go out and find out, where does the consumer who would buy this kind of product, what kind of discussions are they having with other people? Who are they listening to as far as experts, voices, before they even get into the shopping process for your kind of product, so that you can embed yourself into the community, understand their pains before they're even looking for the solution. Not that you're out there prospecting, but you're connecting with who your actual target audience is, which is, a lot of brands do a poor job of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Brian, this has been incredibly valuable. I really appreciate your insights and openness.
Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.